Hello, I'm Dr. Don Frazier, and this is Rachel Brandon-Hopper. Today we're going to cover the evolution of academia. In fact, we're going to travel all the way back to the Library of Alexandria, where scholars were mapping the stars, writing epic poems, and sometimes fighting for their lives, just to learn stuff. In this episode, we'll make our way back through that ancient civilization to early developments of universities in the United States, and then end with a look at today's culture of academia.
Today, millions of students around the world are pursuing some form of higher education.
Like you.
Yeah. You could walk into any university classroom and see pretty much the same thing. My question to you is, how much has the current culture of academia evolved from, say, 288 BCE? Let's take a look at the Library of Alexandria. Today, we have access to infinite databases.
Sure.
Back then, though, as the letters of Aristeas suggest, the Library of Alexandria was one of a kind for this time period.
Oh, absolutely. It was a worldwide landmark. But who was this Aristeas guy?
Well, Aristeas was one of the figures responsible for translating what would eventually be recognized as the Old Testament into Greek.
Okay.
This project was referenced in the famous Letter of Aristeas, which is why we know about it today.
Okay.
He wrote this letter to his brother explaining what he was doing and why, and it's documentation like Aristeas's that provide us with what we have today.
As far as the Alexandrian Library.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So he understood the significance of where he was and what he was doing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, this location is famous for multiple reasons, as I'm sure you know. It was home to the works of many famous Greek scholars like Archimedes, Euclid, and Ptolemy.
Wow.
Archimedes is widely known for his principle on hydrostatics and the development of the compound pulley and hydraulic screw. Euclid is popular in the mathematical community for his developments in geometry. Many high school students may actually remember learning Euclidean geometry. I do. Kind of. Finally, Ptolemy is famous for his early works in geography and astronomy. Men and women traveled for weeks and sometimes months to study at the library, but after many years of natural and man-made catastrophes and political and religious discord, scholars were literally risking their lives to study there. Some spent many years, some spent their whole lives, attempting to master the subjects that they were studying.
Wow. So tell us some more about this library.
Well, the library is widely known for its tragic demise.
Okay.
It's assumed that in the year of 48 BCE, hundreds of years after the founding of the library, the city of Alexandria fell under attack by the Romans and suffered greatly from a devastating fire. It is heavily speculated that this attack was the same fire that ended the famous library, but who knows? Many historians consider this a great tragedy, considering all of the texts that were there were permanently lost.
Yeah, we don't even know what we lost.
Exactly.
So now everybody who went through world history in high school probably knows about the fire at the Library of Alexandria. However, I feel like it's important to interject here and remind the audience that the library was just one fundamental component of the city of Alexandria. I mean, Alexandria is kind of a big deal.
Absolutely.
This city had a uniquely developed culture that produced revolutionary ideas that are obviously still impacting us today.
I agree. Scholars were still studying in Alexandria for hundreds of years after the fire.
What are they studying, the ashes and scraps?
No, well, this was thanks to the preservation of the sister library.
They had a backup.
They did!
See, look at that.
And the general passion for the pursuit of knowledge. The whole city had a climate conducive to scholarship. But when political and religious leadership changed, officials opposed the ideas being taught and wanted the scholars to conform to state and church agendas. One woman in particular, Hypatia, was brutally tortured and murdered by a Christian mob in 415 AD. Hypatia studied geometry and taught Neoplatonism. Many historians argue that she was also an influential political figure in Alexandria around the time of her death. Her influence and teachings began to concern certain Christian members. The torture of Hypatia was cruel, inhumane, and set a precedent for all of those that were struggling to practice and teach what they believed. Due to the dark circumstances of her death, Hypatia would be labeled as the first martyr to science.
Oh, yeah, they kind of skinned her and dragged her through the streets, gouged out her eyes, tore her limb from limb. It was rough. So she's nothing but a pile of mush after all this rough treatment, and the thoughts and the processes that she was investigating are gone. Now, she was killed because she refused to Christian baptism, if I remember correctly.
Well, that was just one of the many reasons. Many people didn't like her back then.
Yeah, for any number of reasons. It was
Yeah.
probably more political than religious, but back then politics and religion are indistinguishable. Yeah. All right, so perhaps it was just a hit on a smart woman. All right.
Well, I feel like it's safe to say that no matter the intent behind Hypatia's murder, she served as an incredibly important martyr to science and women's rights.
Okay. It's about time we take a break. When we get back, we'll keep on making our way through history and see what else has changed in terms of learning from back then to now. We'll be right back.
History has become one of the most fought-over battlegrounds in terms of shifting people's views and opinions about their country. In response to this, we have decided to launch a website called Go To History that will become your home for clear-eyed history content. Our objective is to put history out there, free of agendas, and allow you, the viewers, to decide what you believe and decide how to interpret this information. With experienced professors such as Dr. Don Frazier and Dr. Stephen Hardin teaching courses and creating agenda-free content for students and just plain history enthusiasts, the content of Go To History is vastly informative and unbiased.
Hey history people, it's Phil Collins here. I am just giving a shout out to a couple of guys that you're going to be hearing from. And they're good friends of mine, but they're also incredibly knowledgeable historians. Dr. Donald Frazier and Dr. Stephen Hardin. Both great friends of mine, both helped me out with my book on the Alamo. And two guys, if you don't know much about history, these are the first two guys you should go to. Okay, what they don't know isn't worth knowing. Don Frazier, Steve Hardin, I hope you enjoy their presentations.
My name is Evan Williams, a history major at McMurray University, and I love the layout of the Go To website. I mean, it is singularly built from the ground up with user convenience in mind. Every study available is within a single Courses tab, with each lesson having a single page for each of its individual videos, text, visuals, and quizzes, all at easy grasp. This is most definitely history made simple.
Please log on to www.gotohistory.com.
Now, let's move on to the early 12th century, where we really start to see a change in academia. Up until this point, people were typically following one scholar, and they were typically learning in an outside environment.
So they were disciples.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of scholars actually tried to mimic the disciples, which was really interesting, I thought.
Yeah, and a good teaching technique.
Yeah, but as time went on, the social tension between scholars and commoners grew to be too much, thus bringing forth what some historians today would call the first universities. Okay. The scholars during this area were all men who, for the most part, were pursuing lives as clergymen.
Well, sure. So you're saying that up to this point, academia was basically just a bunch of fellows living together thinking lofty thoughts.
Yeah. These guys were pretty hardcore, though. If we look at Oxford University, we can see that its architectural structure resembles that of a fortified castle.
Right.
This was entirely intentional. It was built to protect the scholars that were learning there.
Yeah, ideas can be dangerous. Weren't these guys practically above the law in places like Oxford?
Oh, absolutely. And this was the tension that created an interesting dynamic that we will see today called town and gown. To put it simply, this refers to the townspeople versus the scholars. On February 10th of 1355 in Oxford, 63 students and roughly 30 townspeople were killed during one of these town and gown riots. This day would be marked in history as St. Scholastica's Day. And here's a brief clip providing an explanation behind these tensions.
The riot lasted for 3 days and left more than 90 people dead. The townsfolk were found to be responsible and were ordered to attend Mass for the souls of the dead students every year on the anniversary of the riot.
Wow. All right, well, that would probably be a black mark on their permanent record.
You think? I couldn't imagine getting away with anything like that. In comparison to a college education today, though, I do see the resemblances in the way students are expected to learn a range of subjects while maintaining a sense of discipline. Students pursuing a university degree are allowed to formulate their own unique analysis on subjects they are studying.
It's kind of the idea behind the liberal arts. So, in essence, minds once held in bondage to a particular doctrine could then be liberated to find their own answers through reflection and the pursuit of wisdom, like the Greeks.
Exactly. I just find it really interesting that even though we're looking at so many different time periods and civilizations, we've been able to identify many common aspects and impacts. Now, I'd like to shift our focus to the United States.
Right.
It's 1636, and Harvard College has been founded in Massachusetts.
Not yet the United States, but we're going that way.
Well,
yeah.
we're there.
They're British colonies.
Yeah. Now, Harvard College was supported and created by the Great and General Court of the Massachusetts Bay Colony to educate the young men joining the clergy. Today, Harvard University is widely known for producing some of the most famous scholars in academia. Universities like Harvard College set the precedent for students pursuing a form of higher education. Today, students across the world compete to gain entry into these elite facilities and attempt to make a significant contribution to their field of study. I feel like it's important to mention here that during the early beginnings of universities, there were multiple social divides in the United States. During the colonial period, academia was aimed at the elite who had the means to afford it and utilize their educations in a patriarchal society. They were trained to govern, and the curriculum reflected those soft skills like philosophy, rhetoric, and languages to achieve peak academic stature. One needed the right social and economic statuses. But even in the 18th century, not one elite scholar could have imagined how much the world of academia would have evolved for their descendants.
Well, that's true. Once we come back, you and I will delve further into this conversation because there is a shift in the 19th century. We'll be right back.
And good day, everybody. Welcome to The Professors from McMurray University in Abilene, Texas. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
I'm Don Frazier, and our special guest is my colleague and longtime friend, Gary Shanafelt.
And
I'm Scott, the engineer.
My older brother, Tim Frazier. John Samudio to my left, and we're joined in the studio today by Rob Frazier, an expert on cybersecurity. My mom was pregnant a lot.
Yeah, a lot. Dad was a checker player. She moved, he'd jump her. Anyway.
The University of California, Berkeley, which, as we all know, has a much better graduate program in history than they do a football team.
you're still smarting over that, aren't you?
Well, I wear my Cal Berkeley sweatshirt here, and the students all kind of think, why are you doing that? I said, well, because they've got a great graduate program. And
Yes.
They don't realize that.
And we're back. So, how do you think the scholars of these colonial times would react to the current state of academia? After all, they believed in civic virtue, which meant that training minds to handle the affairs of the Republic was paramount. Could you provide a brief timeline of what has changed in academia from the 17th century to today in the United States?
Well, let me start with a description of the Prussian model of academia.
The Prussians enter
Yes,
the
they
story.
do.
All right.
Essentially, this model of education was used to imitate and promote a style of factory education. The United States adopted this method in the 19th century, and for the most part, the Prussian model of academia still holds as a strong foundational aspect within the education system here today.
So the time period of factories leads to factory education.
Yes.
All right.
Which is a smart move, if
Yeah,
I
I
say
mean,
so
it's,
myself.
society changes, times change, people change.
Well, that's what we'd like to think.
All right.
But let's start just before the 19th century, because this is where the Prussians introduced their very own model of education. The model highly resembles that of an assembly line, and still today we see many qualities from this structure. This is where we see X amount of kids setting to X amount of rows, the rules of the classroom are harsher and based on worker performance, and the sense of intense competition is instituted between the children.
So you're not just hanging out with a bunch of long-haired dudes underneath a shade tree thinking lofty thoughts anymore. It will be done exactly like this.
Precisely.
Precisely. All right.
Then we move into around the 1840s, which is when Horace Mann introduced the Prussian model to the United States.
I bet he's from Massachusetts.
This turned out to be revolutionary. His persistence and influence on the American education system is what labeled him as the father of the common school. Once the United States reached the 1870s, public education had become more common, but was not yet standardized.
Okay.
People were still learning and teaching a variety of methods and skills. It was not all set to one standard system of education, and up until that point, people didn't mind. Those who were pursuing a higher standard of education were merely one step ahead by the time they got there.
Okay.
Then, in 1892, the Committee of 10 introduced the idea to standardize education throughout the United States.
Of course.
They decided on 12 years of compulsory education, which is still the standard today. These guys are the reason we take specific classes each year, like chemistry your sophomore year and physics your junior year. They wanted to see even growth and progression for all school-age children.
No child left behind, sort of.
But the problem is, things haven't really changed since then. For the most part, we're still doing today what they were doing almost 120 years ago. And while there have been changes, they haven't been anything significant enough to be deemed a new era of standardized education.
Okay, so I'm just curious. Seeing as you really just graduated from high school, did you see any changes to this standard during your 12-year academic career?
Well, come to think of it, my high school did start incorporating these things called endorsement plans my freshman year. Essentially, we were given 5 or 6 endorsement options that contained the classes best fit for the type of job or degree we wanted. Mine, for instance, was the Arts and Humanities plan. I took a lot of history, fine arts, and English classes, and never took physics.
Wow.
It was small details like that that I actually think benefited a lot of us, but I guess we won't truly have that data for a while now.
Well, we might as well experiment on y'all.
Yeah. And you guys did.
Yeah, thank you.
But along with that, I guess I've seen more of a push for students to follow the rigorous STEM path. I see online quite often the request and demand for more STEM students, be
STEM
it
being?
science, technology, engineering, math.
Okay.
But be it in general or of a certain gender or race, the need for those students is increasing every day. Something I can't argue was as big of a problem when academia was introduced to the United States.
But it does remind me of the Prussian system. We must have more engineers for our factories.
Exactly.
Great, so STEM, STEM, STEM. All right, I like the whole idea about history instead. All right, so the U.S. went from a place that valued the liberal arts, essentially training people to lead, and really training men to lead,
Yes.
in a way that inculcated civic virtue, public virtue into their style of leadership. We've gone away from that to more of a vocational approach. We need engineers and mechanics like we did back in the industrial age. All right, vocational education over the liberal arts.
Well, apparently so. But overall, the United States is ever-changing. It wouldn't be until 1954 when the Supreme Court ruled that the segregation of schools was unconstitutional.
Okay.
Thanks to Brown v. Board of Education.
Sure.
President Jimmy Carter signed the Department of Education into law in October of 1979. And it's examples like these that remind us that the 20th century demanded an acute education reform in the United States. But now it's the year 2018, and many young adults across the United States are pulling into their lecture halls with their MacBook Pros and iPhone X's. Not me. I have a Chromebook. We can't all be like that. And the professor puts his PowerPoint on the whiteboard, and a passerby might hear thousands of clicks and taps coming from the students who are trying to absorb every bit of information before the slide disappears.
Or they're shopping.
Yeah.
Or following the game.
I've definitely seen that around.
Yeah, I mean, all those screens go up, and I'm going, yeah, 1 out of 3 of you guys are paying attention. The other bunch of you guys are someplace else.
Yep.
All right, so what would you say is the major difference from today's world of academia to that of Harvard College of yore, or to the ancient days in the streets of Alexandria?
Well, students today are experiencing something revolutionary.
Okay.
The internet has opened up the gateway to worldwide access to every bit of information in the world. The pursuit of higher education is now easier, and one can argue that it's more intense. Now, there's really no good excuse to not know something, as knowledge is just a few keystrokes away.
Sure.
I know for myself personally that I'm going to college with an end goal, a solid education with the hopes of obtaining a degree in the process. Now, these degrees range from an associate's to a doctorate's. The process of obtaining any type of degree varies in time from person to person.
I hear what you're saying. And I believe that, a lot of times students are focused on the degree instead of the education. So I would argue that you go for the education, which is marked by the awarding of a degree. I got a degree, but not an education as an undergraduate. But you have this ladder of degrees from associates all the way to doctorates, and some people stress that they're not going all the way to the top of their particular field and they're getting off of this sort of ladder too soon. It's everybody. Essentially, education's open to whoever wants to go out there and grab it, and I think it's becoming even more accessible. But it's interesting that you brought up all the electronics, because now technically everybody has the Library of Alexandria in their pocket.
Absolutely. So, anyway, the way I see it, pursuing a degree today is much easier for most Americans as online courses are on the rise.
Sure.
For years, many people put off attending college because it was too difficult to attend and work full-time or fulfill their children's needs.
Sure, they had to get the crops in. Things like that back in the day. Sure.
Absolutely. But today, colleges across the United States offer a multitude of degree plans that are aimed towards students whose first obligation is taking care of themselves. And I think that's really important.
Sure. So instead of having to devote your life and treasure to making a pilgrimage to Alexandria, now you can sit in your house slippers and get the same material online. And it doesn't matter if you are male or female or whatever your identity. It is the democratization of education.
Exactly. Education has evolved in thousands of ways over the century. The means and purpose of academia have evolved as well. Today, I'm sitting here with you discussing what's already happened.
Sure.
And I'm sure that someday in the far future, a student just like me will begin to make these same types of comparisons. Except you and I will be called the old people.
Yeah, well, I will be called the dead people, probably. You'll be the old people. Well, all right. So I'm the older person for the time being. After we take this break, let's hear from some of these people and have a little conversation, really taking this subject and spinning it around 360 degrees to get a better angle on it. All right, we'll be right back.
Bear Leader Tours. Where will Bear Leader Tours take you? Everywhere. Paris. Bruges. Trier. Battlefields. Pearl Harbor. Pacific Beaches. New Orleans. Join the adventure.
www.mcwhinney.org.
And now we're back, and we're going to hear from some of your fan base. All right, this comes from us at Bad Beth 1999. Not Bad Breath, but Bad Beth. All right, how do you think children will be studying, learning in 20 years?
Well, Bad Beth, I think we'll still be seeing some similarities 20 years from now. However, I also think the technological advances we're seeing arise today, like the implementation of laptops, tablets, and online interactive lessons, well, I'd like to think we're constantly living in this evolution.
Okay.
My hope is that students will be more engaged, more challenged, and more encouraged. And I think we'll be seeing some of the changes in the time students are learning and what they're learning for. Honestly, Bad Beth, the reform I'd like to see the most is the end of standardized education and tests. And I hope that in 20 years, the quality of those kids' education won't be subjected to a test that may or may not accurately portray their academic strengths.
Hey, preach it, sister.
Yeah, but I guess we'll both find out in 2038, though, right?
2038, man, that's a long time from now. All right. And maybe the robot Prussian teachers. Don't forget them. We're going to have robot teachers. Robotics. All right. This next question comes at us from at Joe Average. Would you personally rather learn by textbook or by computer? A lot of textbooks are online, and there's a lot of packaging of the old, you have to read this block of text content into some sort of integrated online package. What's your preference?
Well, I think I've always been better with books. I like to have it right in front of me. But that being said, I'm forever grateful for the internet and all it's done for me.
Sure.
I would definitely take computers over books solely because most books today are also on the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'd say it's a win-win.
Yeah, information's information. It's how you package it and the media that you push it through is the only difference.
Absolutely.
You know, if you think of a book as essentially a thumb drive that won't fit into the computer, you know, thumb drive slot.
Yeah.
You get the same idea. All right. At Toyoyo the Pecan.
That's an interesting username.
Man, that'd be tough to type in over and over again. Do you feel like the amount of information on the internet helps students in college or hinders students in college? Should colleges steer away from using the internet, or should they continue using it to its fullest capacity, whatever that means?
Well, honestly, I feel like when utilized properly, the internet is one of the most beneficial components of education today. Endless access to information allows students to see things in many different aspects. As long as colleges are promoting an educated and well-informed use of the internet, I don't see it as a problem, but I definitely think it is a problem when my classmates are on Amazon during the lecture.
Yes, absolutely. I had a student the other day, and we were talking about whether or not all people are created equally. Great. So somebody said, wait, you think you're the equal of Abraham Lincoln? This student looked at him and says, well, Abraham Lincoln would be a better politician than me, but I would absolutely destroy him in fantasy football. And how do we know that? Because he runs fantasy football all the time during my class. All right, so interesting. It can be used for good or ill.
Yeah.
This one comes to us from Lindsay Barron. Do you think the utilization of standardized tests is beneficial to students who want to go to college? We're really talking about testing students into the dark ages, and this is really an outgrowth of No Child Left Behind.
Absolutely. And
Right.
honestly, no. It has been proven over and over again that standardized tests do not benefit students as a whole and limit the overall quality of their education. Students that are used to roughly 12 years of outdated tests aren't truly prepared for the grueling trials of your typical college experience. I haven't taken a multiple choice test yet in college.
Really?
And I've been taking college classes since I was a junior in high school. The way I prepared was by writing and reading all the time.
Reading, writing, and thinking.
Absolutely. And the standardized tests that I took, I mean, no offense, but they didn't help.
Okay, well, says you. All right, this next one is at French Fry 99. Oh, this is actually me.
Oh, wow.
What would you, me, I say are the key aspects to successful society or culture of academia? Well, academia has become heroically politicized, for starters, and that has got to change. You know, and here's why. I say it's heroically politicized. There, especially in the humanities, there is very clear left-leaning bias. And if we're going to be truly a place where liberal arts can flourish, every idea needs to be considered, rolled around a little bit. Now, I had a student one time come up here to McMurray from Austin, and I said, well, how do you like being up here at McMurray in Abilene, Texas? And she goes, well, I'm from Austin. And anytime a conversation starts with, well, I'm from Austin, we're in trouble. So this girl said, in Austin, we are trained to be very open-minded and inclusive, and we believe that everyone should have a voice, not like these closed-minded rednecks in Abilene. And I said, so let me get this straight. You've got a place at the table for everybody except for people you don't like. I said, that's the opposite of multiculturalism, you understand. So you're embracing multiculturalism unless it's cultures that you don't like, and then they have to exit the room. So if you are going to talk about an open and wide open landscape for people like you to consider everything, throw it out there into the marketplace of ideas, see what sticks, see what doesn't stick, then we need to be sincere about that.
Yeah.
Instead of suppressing ideas that may run counter to what the desired push is. Now, the way this plays out politically is some faculty get hired, others do not. Some research gets published, some gets suppressed. And so now we've gone away from that sort of wide open idea of, say, the Library of Alexandria to the days of Hypatia.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden, if you ask the wrong questions or if you reach the wrong conclusions, the mob will skin you alive and drag you through the streets. And so that is the model that we need to get away from as much as possible. I'm all for a very practical education. I teach history.
Yeah.
And so I like you guys that come through my classes to be able to apply what we're doing theoretically to a practical sense. Ultimately, I want you guys to get off your parents' payroll. And so in order to do that, you also have to be fairly practical. You can't just be about ideas, but how do you put these ideas into practice to better you yourself personally? Big fan of Adam Smith, self-interest. But also how to benefit society and the culture that has nurtured you. Mm-hmm. So that's my answer to that.
Well, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. You didn't ask the question, but you got to receive the answer.
Absolutely. And that's all that matters.
And that's all that matters. All right, that's about all the time we have for the show today. I appreciate you coming in. I'm Don Frazier.
And I'm Rachel Brandon-Hopper.
And this has been a fun episode of Historical Trends. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.